Mixed media can sometimes be overwhelming. Just last week, I had to walk away because I couldn't finish a project. But today, I want to show you how mixed media can actually be easy, just by following 5 simple steps. The first one is collaging papers in the background. This is not a necessary step, but it's one that I often love doing as it adds texture and character to my pages. I use gel medium to glue collage pieces in the background, making sure I leave some white space, as I know from my previous attempt last week that it is necessary. I even glue some torn book pages for extra texture. Old book pages are free, so they're a great way to add inexpensive texture to your art. I dry this step really well so I can add more layers. The next step is very important, and is to add a base. A good way to prepare the background for color is to apply gesso. In this case, I dilute gesso with a little bit of water to create a white wash that I brush across my page. If you're not collaging, then this would be your first step to prep your background for color. I only want a thin layer as I want to make sure that the written texture underneath is seen. Once dry, I'm ready for the next step. Adding 3D texture. I apply modeling paste through my tribal mandala stencil using a silicone brush. First on one side of the page, right over the tissue paper design, and then add a smaller version of the design on the other side of the page to balance the composition. This needs to be dried really well before the next step, which is adding color. This step is usually my favorite, as I love color. This technique requires a lot of water as I use watercolors. However, I don't use watercolors in the way watercolorists use them. I prefer using the colors by adding them slowly to the edges of my page and using water to move them across the stencil design. This enhances the 3D effect of the stenciled area as it creates shadows and depth. I love combining different colors together and watching them drip down the page. It's important to wipe off any excess color from the white spaced area as it creates contrast against the color. This is probably another one of the mistakes I made in the previous video and why I had to turn that page on that design. I even love adding some black on the edges, which mixes beautifully with the other colors to create an extra added contrast. You don't have to add black if you don't want to, but I often do as it adds so much depth to my projects. I even take a gold watercolor palette and add a little sparkling shimmer to the edges while they're still wet, and also use it to create splatters across the page, both with the gold and even with white watercolor as well. I have different watercolor pans that I combine, as some sets have different shades of colors. I sometimes wish every project I create would go as easy as this one. Once the colors are dry, we are down to the most important step, as it unifies the whole design. This step can differ depending on your style, and for me, it always starts by adding some script stamping using black archival ink. I even stamp a focal point using a sun-shaped design that I carved myself a few months ago. I color it in with the same watercolors, cut around it with scissors, and glue it to the page along with a heartfelt sentiment. I'm so happy with the results, and even more glad that I attempted this page again, because it shows me that I can always learn from my mistakes. And if you want to learn from my mistakes as well, then watch this video right here.